You brought who? That was the first thing I said at the airport. I was holding my little carry-on and staring at a swarm of people behind my daughter Danielle and my son Greg. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. Greg's in-laws. Danielle's husband's uncle. Even a few toddlers. 25 people, give or take. And all of them smiling like I was the hostess of a destination wedding I didn't plan. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. Because trust me, this one nearly broke me. My name is Miriam. I'm a mother of 2 grown kids. I live alone now in a quiet corner of Santa Fe. For the past 2 years, I'd been planning something special. A weekend in Las Vegas with just me, Greg, and Danielle. First-class flights, a suite on the Strip, dinner at Joël Robuchon. Not to show off, but to reconnect. We hadn't spent time together, just the 3 of us, in years. I wanted something simple, something sweet. What I got was a full-blown circus. I blinked and stared at them. Danielle waved like this was some sitcom surprise party. "Don't worry," she said, grinning. "Everyone's super excited. We told them you were treating." I didn't know how to respond. My stomach dropped, not because of the money, but because I instantly realized I was no longer the center of this trip. I wasn't even part of it. I was the purse. Greg clapped a hand on my shoulder and said, "You always said you wanted to see everyone together. So we figured, why not make it happen?" I wanted to scream, but instead, I nodded. I followed them through security like I was tagging along to someone else's vacation. We boarded the flight. They sat up front. I was in the back, middle seat, between Greg's business partner and his partner's wife. People I'd never met before were thanking me for this amazing treat. A little girl asked if we were going to see the tigers. I said, "I don't know, sweetie. I didn't plan this trip." In the hotel lobby, everything was loud. Laughter, check-in chaos, kids running. The concierge handed Greg a folder full of room assignments. I reached for mine. He didn't offer one. "Mum," Danielle said quickly, "we put you in a quiet room on the 10th floor. Figured you'd want your space." My space? This was supposed to be our trip. I got in the elevator alone, holding a keycard that didn't even have my name on it. The room was tiny, no view, no flowers like I had requested. My hands trembled. I opened the curtains to look at the Strip and saw nothing but the back wall of another building. This wasn't a vacation. This was a setup. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall. My ears were ringing. I reached for my phone. No missed calls, no messages. Nobody thought to check if I was okay. I was the one who booked the restaurants, researched the shows, called the hotel for group reservations. I had spent nights on my laptop, adjusting itineraries, confirming payments. But now I wasn't part of any of it. That evening, I walked down to dinner. Everyone was already seated. Champagne flutes clinking, plates full of food. Danielle toasted. "To Mum, for making this all possible." They all turned to me, lifted their glasses, but nobody gave me a seat. I stood for a moment like a statue. Then someone finally pulled out a chair near the end of the table. Greg raised his voice. "Hope you don't mind, Mum. We added a few extras. It was just easier that way." Easier for whom? I smiled. My throat burned. I couldn't taste the food. I barely spoke. Later that night, in my little room, I opened my email and saw the first invoice from the hotel. It was itemized. Room upgrades, show tickets, limousines, bottle service, brunch buffet for 30. Total so far, 42,000 and change. My name was on the billing contact. That was when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was planned, and I had a choice. Either stay silent or show them what happens when the purse strings pull back. The morning after that dinner, I sat alone at a cafe across from the Bellagio fountains, picking at a dry croissant and sipping coffee that tasted like burnt pennies. Around me, tourists laughed and posed for pictures. The strip was alive and bright, but inside me, something had dimmed. I wasn't angry yet. Not fully. I was just hollow. I kept staring at the hotel invoice on my phone. $42,000 and counting. I read it again and again, like maybe the numbers would change. Like maybe someone would call and say, "Hey, Mom, we messed up. We'll pay our share." But no one did. Instead, I got a group text from Danielle. A photo of the family in front of the Eiffel Tower replica, all grinning. The caption read, "Best trip ever. Thanks, Mum." I didn't reply. As I sat there, I thought about everything it had taken to plan this, and everything it had taken to get here. After my husband died, I had to raise Greg and Danielle on my own. He left behind a small pension, but it barely covered groceries. I picked up extra shifts at the library, taught adult literacy at night, and cleaned a local bookstore on Sundays just to make ends meet. I skipped vacations. I skipped birthdays. I wore the same coat for 8 winters. But I paid for braces. I paid for tuition. I paid for piano lessons, science camps, school trips. I never let them feel the weight of how tight it all was. That was my choice. I thought that's what mothers do. I used to tell myself it would all be worth it. That one day they'd look back and say, "She gave us everything." I didn't need gifts. I didn't want recognition. I just wanted to matter. I remembered Greg's high school graduation. I sat in the back row of the auditorium because all the front seats were taken by his girlfriend's family. I clapped so hard my hands stung. He didn't even look at me when he walked across the stage. Later that night, he posted a photo with his friends and captioned it, "My real family." I told myself it was just a teenage phase. I remembered Danielle's wedding. I paid for the florist, the hair, the backup venue when the first one fell through. During the reception, they forgot to put me in the family photo. The photographer apologized. Danielle didn't. I told myself she was just stressed. Now I sat across from the fountains, watching the water leap and fall in perfect rhythm, and I wondered how many times I had made excuses for being invisible. I went back to the hotel and knocked on Greg's suite. He opened the door, shirtless, holding a mimosa. "Hey, Mom. What's up?" I stepped inside. The place smelled like citrus and cologne. Music was playing low. Someone laughed in the back room. Greg motioned to the couch, but I stayed standing. "I saw the invoice," I said. He blinked. "Yeah. The hotel front desk said they sent it to you by mistake." "It wasn't a mistake. You put my name on it." He shrugged. "I mean, yeah, but you said this trip was your treat." "For you and Danielle," I said quietly. "Not for your entire family tree." Greg's smile faded. "Come on. It's not that big of a deal. You've got savings, right?" I didn't answer. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. In the hallway, I passed Danielle. She was wearing a glittery dress and carrying shopping bags. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Back to my room." She paused. "We're doing dinner at Hell's Kitchen tonight. You coming?" I looked at her, really looked at her. This was the girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, the one I sat up with during chickenpox, who cried when I left her at preschool for the first time. That girl was gone, replaced by someone who didn't even ask if I had eaten. "I have other plans," I said, and walked away. That night, I sat in my tiny room, lights off, phone screen glowing. I scrolled through old emails. ones where I confirmed reservations, upgraded rooms, added special notes for dietary restrictions. I had done it all, thought of everything, paid every deposit. But somehow, none of it counted. Not enough to earn me a seat at their table. I opened my banking app. The total was sinking. The pending charges were stacking up like bricks. Champagne brunch, group tickets to Cirque du Soleil, spa packages, one after another, all linked to the credit card I had used for the reservations. The card I thought was safe because no one else had the physical copy. But then I saw something that stopped me cold. A charge from the casino, then another, then several in a row. Greg and Danielle didn't need my card. They had added themselves as authorized users months ago. I had no idea. My hands went cold, the kind of cold that starts in your bones. I stared at the screen and felt something twist in my chest. Not fear, not sadness, something tighter. I wasn't just left out, I was used. For the first time in my life, I let the thought settle in. I raised them wrong. I loved them wrong. I never taught them boundaries. I just gave and gave and gave. And now they didn't even blink before taking more. I powered off the phone. I stared into the dark. Then I made a list, not of expenses, of steps, what I needed to do next. It started with 3 words: close the account. The next morning started quiet, too quiet for Las Vegas. I opened my hotel room door and found a receipt tucked underneath. It was folded neatly. I picked it up and read it in the hallway light. Another round of charges. Dinner for 27 at a steakhouse. Bottle service. Private table at a nightclub. My name on every single line. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it back and slid it into my purse. I walked down to the lobby. The same energy buzzed around me, but it felt like I was on mute. Laughter, music, clinking glasses, people rushing towards something. I just stood still. I couldn't remember the last time someone even said good morning to me on this trip. At the coffee bar, the server asked if I was with the Holbrook celebration group. I nodded. He smiled. "You've got quite a crew. They've taken over half the mezzanine." I sat with my latte and watched them from afar. My son holding court near the escalators, laughing like he didn't have a care in the world. Danielle posing for selfies in front of the flower wall. Nobody noticed me. Not one person looked over. I got up and headed back to the elevators. My hands felt light, like they weren't attached to me. When I got to my floor, I saw Danielle walking ahead of me. She was on the phone, laughing. "No, she hasn't said anything. She's just kind of floating around. It's fine. She always handles stuff eventually." Then her voice dropped. "Greg says she won't make a scene. She never does." She turned a corner and didn't see me. I stopped. My chest tightened. My mouth was dry. That sentence echoed in my head like a chant. She never does. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the empty hallway. Then I went into my room, sat at the small desk, and opened my laptop. I pulled up my credit card account. The numbers looked worse in daylight. The balance had jumped by almost $8,000 overnight. Spa packages, champagne carts, even 2 helicopter tours. I clicked over to the bank portal. Greg and Danielle were still listed as authorized users, had been since last fall. I tried to remember the moment I said yes. I couldn't. Probably during a rushed holiday call, or some emergency where they needed temporary help. They had made it permanent. I removed them both. Then I locked the card. Then I opened a new checking account under my name only, no one else. I called the bank and asked them to transfer my remaining funds out of the joint savings account I had opened 5 years ago with Greg, the one I stupidly thought we might use for family trips. The woman on the phone said politely, "Are you sure?" I said yes without hesitation. By noon, I had done more for myself than I had in the last 10 years combined. At lunch, I didn't sit with them. I took a cab to a small Thai place off the strip. I ordered a dish I couldn't pronounce and ate it slowly. No one asked me to split the check. No one rolled their eyes at my choice. No one expected anything from me. When I got back to the hotel, I went to my room and found a note taped to the door. It was from Greg. "Hey, Mum. Danielle said you've been kind of distant. Hope everything's okay. Can we chat later?" No apology. No explanation. Just the kind of message you send when you know something's wrong, but refuse to admit your role in it. I left the note where it was and walked straight to the business center. I printed out every transaction, every receipt, every reservation confirmation. I highlighted what I paid for and what they added. I created a folder and labeled it Vegas. Then I sat there with my head in my hands. I remembered the first time I let Greg borrow money. He was 22, had just gotten his first apartment, and needed a little help with furniture. I gave him $5,000. He said he'd pay it back. He never did. A few years later, Danielle asked for a temporary loan to cover her honeymoon flights. I wired the money. She sent me a thank you emoji. I told myself they were young. I told myself I didn't mind. But I did. And now they had taken what should have been a gift and turned it into a transaction I never agreed to. I went back to my room and lay on the bed. I stared at the ceiling. My phone buzzed. Another group text. A photo of everyone at the pool, with a caption from Danielle. "Mum's being so sweet, letting us all relax. We're spoiled." I turned off the phone. I closed my eyes and remembered the last conversation I had with my late husband before he passed. We were in the hospital. He squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't carry everything, Miriam. They need to learn." But I didn't listen. I carried it all. And now I had nothing left to hold except silence. That night, I packed my suitcase, folded everything neatly, left the thank you gift basket from the hotel untouched. In the morning, I checked out early. No one saw me leave. No one asked. I sat at the airport bar with a cup of tea and the folder labeled Vegas. I looked out the window as the sun rose over the desert, and for the first time, I wasn't ashamed. I wasn't scared. I was just ready. I landed back in Santa Fe late Sunday night. The airport was quiet. I stepped outside and felt the desert wind brush against my face, dry and honest. I didn't call a cab. I didn't ask anyone to pick me up. I walked to the shuttle stop and waited with my suitcase, folder in hand, and a silence inside me that didn't feel empty anymore. It felt steady. By the time I got home, the sun was just beginning to rise. My little adobe house looked the same as it always did. Peach walls, turquoise door, wind chimes dancing in the morning air. But everything inside me had shifted. I didn't unpack. I didn't even sit down. I poured a glass of water, set the Vegas folder on the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. Then I opened a second folder, one I hadn't looked at in years. It was labeled Estate. It held everything: the deed to the house, my life insurance policies, my will. I had made copies of it all when I turned 65, just in case. At the time, I listed Greg and Danielle as equal beneficiaries. I even wrote a letter to each of them, folded neatly, tucked in with the documents. It was supposed to be a comfort someday, something for them to read and remember me kindly. Now I looked at those letters and felt nothing. I deleted their names from the will first. Then I called my lawyer's office and asked for an appointment. I didn't even flinch when the receptionist said the soonest they could see me was Wednesday morning. That gave me 2 days. I was going to use them. I spent Monday closing accounts. I shut down every joint savings, checking, and credit line that had either of their names tied to it. I cancelled the backup cards they had never returned. I called customer service lines one after another, saying the same sentence over and over. No, I no longer authorize Greg Holbrook or Danielle Foster to access any part of my account. Each time I said it, the weight lifted a little more. By afternoon, I was exhausted but clearer than I'd been in years. That evening, my neighbor Cheryl knocked on the door with a casserole. She said she saw my porch light on and figured I must be back. "You look thinner," she said, peering at me. "Just tired," I replied. We sat at the kitchen table while she told me about the latest HOA drama. I nodded, smiled politely, and didn't say much. When she left, I ate a small bowl of her casserole, then cleaned the entire kitchen top to bottom. It wasn't messy. I just needed the rhythm. The wiping, rinsing, folding. It kept me from thinking too loudly. But thoughts crept in anyway. I remembered when Greg was 9 and fell off his bike. I carried him home on my back. He cried into my shoulder and bled onto my shirt. I didn't change until he was asleep, because I didn't want to miss him needing anything. I remembered Danielle's first heartbreak. She came home from college for a weekend, curled on my couch, and asked me if I thought she was unlovable. I made her soup and brushed her hair like she was 5 again. I had given them every soft part of me, and they had sharpened it into a tool. Tuesday morning, I went to the print shop. I printed the bank statements, highlighted the charges they made, and stapled each one to the matching receipt from the Vegas folder. Then I printed 2 copies of everything, one for the lawyer, one for me. I stopped by the post office on the way home, mailed a small package to myself, just to see how long it would take, just to test what it felt like to send something I didn't owe to anyone else. That afternoon, Greg called. I didn't answer. Then Danielle texted. Just a question mark. Then another message. "We're worried. Why aren't you replying?" I stared at the words. The gall of it. After all of that. I turned the phone over and left it face down on the counter. That night I didn't cook. I opened a can of soup and ate it standing up. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check the mail. I didn't do anything except sit by the window and watch the sky go from gold to grey. And I let it happen. Because not everything needs a reply. Wednesday morning, I put on my navy blouse and black slacks. No makeup, no jewelry. Just clean clothes and calm hands. The law office was in a quiet plaza. My lawyer, Mrs. Cortez, greeted me with a soft smile. We sat across from each other, and I handed her the folder. "I want to change everything," I said. She opened it, read quietly. "Are you sure?" she asked. I nodded. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. She didn't question me again. We rewrote the will. I removed Greg and Danielle completely. Instead, I created a scholarship fund in my husband's name. It would go to students from single-parent households in New Mexico. Kids like mine. Kids who might actually need the help. We put the house into a living trust. I gave power of attorney to no one. I appointed a neutral executor for the estate. At the end of the meeting, Mrs. Cortez asked if I wanted to leave letters again for the beneficiaries. "No," I said. "No more letters. Everything they need to know is in the silence." I walked out of the building into the bright desert sun. My car was warm. I rolled down the windows and let the wind in. For the first time, I wasn't rushing home to answer a call, reply to a message, or double-check someone else's needs. For the first time, I was only taking care of me. Thursday morning, my doorbell rang at 7:42 a.m. I was still in my robe, sipping coffee and watching the light crawl across the floor. I opened the door slowly, expecting a delivery. Instead, it was Sandra from 2 houses down. She held a grocery bag in one hand and her phone in the other. Her face was lit up with something between concern and amusement. "Are you okay?" she asked, stepping inside without waiting. I blinked. Why wouldn't I be? She handed me the bag. "Banana bread? And because your daughter posted some vague status last night saying, 'Pray for my family.'" I set the bread on the counter. She didn't mean that literally. Sandra sat down at my kitchen table like it was hers. She looked at me closely. "She called me," she said. "Last night. Danielle. Asked if I'd stop by and check on you." I leaned against the sink. "She called you?" She sounded annoyed, not worried, just annoyed. I shook my head. They're starting to feel the shift. Sandra folded her arms. "Did you finally do it?" I nodded. "I changed everything. Will, trust, accounts. They're locked out." She let out a breath like she'd been holding it for months. "Good," she said. "Took you long enough." I smiled faintly and poured us both coffee. We sat in the morning light, quiet for a moment. Then Sandra tapped her nails on the mug. "You know they're going to come for you now, right?" "I know." "And they're not going to play nice." "I'm not playing any more either." Sandra stayed for another 20 minutes. She didn't offer advice, just sat with me, like a guard dog in pearls. After she left, I checked my phone. 4 missed calls from Greg, 2 voicemails, a long text from Danielle. All vague, all passive. Nothing clear, nothing direct. I didn't answer. Instead, I went for a walk. The air smelled like pinon and dust. My neighborhood was quiet except for the sound of a lawnmower down the block. I passed Mr. Atkins watering his porch plants. He waved. I waved back. Everything looked the same, but I walked like someone new. That afternoon, the first real hit came. An email. Subject line, urgent. It was from Greg. 3 paragraphs long, polite on the surface, cold underneath. He said he noticed some changes in the account, said he was confused, asked if something had happened, if I was okay, if we could talk, said he wanted to clear the air, clear the air. I stared at that phrase for a long time. Then I clicked reply. I typed one line. "There is no confusion. Everything is as it should be." Then I hit send. 2 hours later, Danielle showed up. She didn't knock, just walked straight into my kitchen like she used to when she was 16. She wore sunglasses and carried a venti iced latte like a shield. "I drove 6 hours for this," she said. "Can we please talk?" I stood by the sink, arms crossed. "You can talk," I said. "I'll listen." She pulled out a chair and sat down hard. "I don't understand what's going on," she said. "You're acting like we did something horrible." I didn't answer. I waited. "We didn't mean to upset you," she said. "It was just a trip." I raised an eyebrow. "Just a trip?" Danielle flinched. She looked away, then back. "Okay, maybe it got out of hand. But why are you punishing us for it?" "This isn't punishment," I said. "It's correction." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. "You made decisions without me," I continued. "You used what wasn't yours. You assumed I'd clean up after it. Again." "I thought we were family," she whispered. "We are," I said. "But that doesn't mean I have to let you drain me." She stood up. "So what now? You cut us off? Forever?" "That's up to you." Her eyes filled, but her voice stayed sharp. "You'll die alone." I smiled sadly. Better alone than used. She stared at me. Then she left. No hug. No goodbye. I stood in the silence after the door closed and waited for my heart to shatter. It didn't. That evening, I opened a fresh journal. I hadn't written anything by hand in years. I started slow, a sentence at a time. I wrote what I wanted, not what I needed to fix, not what I was supposed to say. I wrote this: I am not angry, I am awake. Then I made tea. I sat on my porch as the sky turned soft and pink. A few neighborhood kids rode bikes past my house. One waved, I waved back. Inside, the phone buzzed again. I didn't check it. I watched the stars come out instead. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like someone waiting to be rescued. I felt like someone who had already saved herself. The next morning, I found Greg's SUV parked outside my house. He was leaning against it, arms crossed, sunglasses on like some corporate cowboy. I didn't need to ask how long he'd been there. The half-empty coffee cup on the roof gave it away. I stepped out onto the porch, not bothering to greet him. He looked up. Can we talk? No one's stopping you. He walked up slowly like I was going to bolt. I didn't move. I came alone, he said. Danielle doesn't know I'm here. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He cleared his throat. You caught us off guard. I waited. I mean, everything you did. The bank accounts, the will, the trust. You blindsided us. You mean I did something without asking your permission? He winced. It's not about permission, it's just, we're family. Greg, I said calmly, do you know how many times you've said that phrase in the last year? He didn't answer. 27. I counted. But not once have you said what it means. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, I'm not here to fight. I just think this all got out of hand. No, I said. It finally came into focus. He stepped closer, voice quieter. You're upset. I get that. But don't you think this is a little extreme? You think protecting what's mine is extreme? I think cutting off your own children is. I laughed once, low. Greg, I didn't cut anyone off. You cut yourselves off the day you turned me into your backup wallet. He looked down. I didn't mean to. But you did. The silence stretched. Wind rustled the trees behind us. He finally said, Vegas was a mess. I see that now. We took it too far. You think this is about Vegas? He blinked. Isn't it? I stepped down onto the grass. This is about the year you turned 12 and asked me why I couldn't afford a new bike like Danny's mum could. And I told you I'd save for it. So I worked weekends cleaning houses. You got the bike. Never said thank you. He shifted uncomfortably. This is about you asking for help with your first apartment, then never paying me back. It's about every silent assumption that my money was a family resource, that my time didn't count, that my labor was free, that my boundaries were flexible. I took a breath. It's not about a trip. It's about a pattern. And I'm done. Greg rubbed the back of his neck. So that's it? You're just going to live the rest of your life mad at us? I'm not mad, I said. I'm done explaining myself. He stared at me, eyes hard to read. Then he said something that surprised me. Dad wouldn't have wanted this. I froze. He kept going. He always talked about how proud he was of how tight we were. He wanted us to stick together. No, I said slowly. He wanted us to respect each other. You forgot the second part. Greg looked like he wanted to argue, but the words didn't come. He picked up his coffee from the roof and walked toward his car. At the door, he paused. "I hope someday you'll reconsider," he said, "for the sake of the family." I smiled tightly. "You said that already." He got in and drove off. I went back inside. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from standing my ground. That afternoon, I got a letter. It wasn't in handwriting I recognized. The return address was from a law office. Inside was a formal notice. Greg and Danielle were contesting the trust. They claimed emotional duress, that I was not of sound mind, that I had been influenced. I sat down at the kitchen table and read it twice. Then I picked up the phone and called Mrs. Cortez. When she answered, I said, "They're trying to sue me." She didn't sound surprised. "We'll respond accordingly. They don't have a case, but you'll need to be ready." I nodded. "I'm ready." That evening, I called Sandra and told her. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "It's starting." "I know." "Do you regret it?" "No." "Then keep going." I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window. Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one. The silence didn't feel peaceful this time. It felt loaded, but not in a way that scared me, in a way that warned me. They weren't done, but neither was I. The summons arrived on a Monday, a plain envelope, thin, sharp. Inside, the first page read, "Notice of petition for emergency hearing." I sat at the kitchen table with the letter in one hand and my tea going cold in the other. They were going to court. Greg and Danielle filed to challenge my trust, claimed I was not acting in my own interest, claimed the changes I made to my estate were sudden, erratic, and possibly coerced. The word incapacitated was in bold. I called Mrs. Cortez. "We anticipated this," she said calmly. "It's intimidation. They're trying to paint me as unstable. They're desperate." The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. 10 days. 10 days for them to try to prove I wasn't fit to control my own affairs. 10 days for me to prepare. I spent that afternoon walking through my house, touching each framed photo on the walls, each stack of books I'd organized, each drawer that held decades of quiet responsibility. There was nothing erratic about this life, nothing unstable. Only the mistake of giving too much to people who never thought to ask if it cost me anything. Tuesday morning, I drove to the courthouse to file a response. On the way there, I passed the school where I used to drop Greg and Danielle off every morning. I could still see their little backpacks bouncing as they ran toward the door. It felt like a memory that didn't belong to me anymore. When I got to the clerk's office, I stood in line behind two people. One was arguing about a traffic ticket. The other was filing for a restraining order. I held my documents tightly, reading the names over and over. Gregory Holbrook and Danielle Foster, my children, suing me. The woman behind the glass accepted my paperwork and stamped it without looking up. "It'll be processed today," she said. "You'll get a notice of confirmation in the mail." I nodded, turned and walked back to the parking lot under the sharp New Mexico sun. That night the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. It was Danielle. Her voice was low, tired. "I didn't want to do this," she said. "But you did." She paused. "We talked to a lawyer. He said we had grounds. You changed everything so fast." "It wasn't fast," I said. "It took me a lifetime." Danielle's breath hitched. "You're really going to let this go all the way to court?" "You filed the motion. I'm just showing up." There was a silence so long I thought she might have hung up. Then she said, "You're not who I thought you were." I let that settle. No, I said. I finally stopped being who you expected me to be. She didn't reply. The line went dead. Wednesday morning, I met with Mrs. Cortez again. She reviewed my paperwork, my bank records, my medical clearance, my handwritten journal entries from the past year. She said my case was solid, my mental state was sound. The judge would see that. They're going to try to make you emotional, she warned. I'm not giving them that. She nodded. Good, because that's all they've got. We prepped for 2 hours. I answered questions about my financial choices, my relationship with my children, my reasons for removing them from the trust. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I went home and slept deeply that night. No dreams. Thursday morning, I wore a grey blouse, black pants, and my late husband's watch. Not because I needed a reminder, but because I wanted to walk in with proof that I remembered how to keep time. My time. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Rows of wooden benches, a single judge at the front. Greg sat at the far end, clean-shaven, in a suit. Danielle next to him, lips tight. Their lawyer stood ready, flipping through a stack of folders like they were props in a show. I didn't look away. When it was my turn, I stood. I answered each question clearly. I explained my decisions with calm. I gave timelines. I provided evidence. I never once raised my voice. Greg's lawyer asked why I removed them from my will after so many years. Because they stopped treating me like a person, I said, and started treating me like a resource. He asked if I had been influenced. I was influenced, I said, by exhaustion, by being used, by years of giving without being seen. Danielle stared at the table. The hearing lasted 90 minutes. The judge didn't decide that day, said she'd review the filings and issue a ruling by the following week. I walked out of the courthouse alone. The sun hit my face. I didn't shield my eyes. When I got to the parking lot, Sandra was waiting in her car. She rolled down the window. How'd it go? I smiled. I said everything I needed to say. She nodded. Now we wait. I drove home with the windows down, the air loud in my ears. Whatever happened next, I knew this part was done. They brought the fight to me. I answered. The days after the hearing moved slowly. Every morning I checked the mailbox, expecting the judge's decision to arrive like a knife wrapped in paper. But it didn't come. Instead, silence filled the space between us, not the peaceful kind, the waiting kind, the kind that stretches across the floor and climbs the walls. I kept my routine simple. Coffee in the morning, a walk around the block, groceries on Tuesdays, laundry on Fridays. It grounded me, gave me something to hold on to while I waited for the next blow. But it also gave me time to think. I spent hours at the dining room table with old notebooks, receipts, letters, birthday cards I had saved and never reread. One from Greg when he was 7, thanking me for taking him to the zoo. One from Danielle, drawn in crayon, calling me the bestest mum ever. I ran my fingers over their handwriting like I was touching a version of them that no longer existed. I wasn't trying to feel sad. I was trying to feel anything that made sense. On the 4th day, I received an email from Danielle. No greeting, just a paragraph that read like a script. We never wanted it to come to this. If you're willing to reverse the changes, we're open to reconciliation. We can fix this, but only if you're reasonable. Reasonable. That word stuck in my throat. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat outside on the porch and watched the wind move through the cottonwood trees, the same ones I planted the year after my husband died. They had grown tall, their roots pushing cracks through the sidewalk. No one told them to stop growing. That night, I cooked myself a full dinner, chicken with rosemary, roasted vegetables, a glass of wine. I set the table like I had company, but there was no one. I ate slowly in silence and let the stillness wash over me. The next morning, I got a call from Mrs. Cortez. "The judge filed her response," she said. "I emailed you the copy." I opened it while still on the line. The decision was clear. The trust stood. My mental fitness was affirmed. The case was dismissed. Mrs. Cortez was still talking, explaining next steps, but her voice felt far away. I closed my eyes and let the words settle into my chest. I won. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like a long exhale I'd been holding since the day Greg and Danielle walked through the gates at the Vegas airport. "Thank you," I said softly into the phone. That afternoon, I cleaned the house from top to bottom. Not because it was dirty, because I needed to move. I needed to touch everything I had built and remind myself that it was still mine. I folded linens, washed the windows, swept the porch. Then I sat with a notepad and started writing down what came next. The list was short. Change passwords, redirect mail to P.O. box, schedule photography class again, start a new garden. I stared at the last one. I hadn't planted anything new in years. The beds out back were dry, the soil forgotten. I used to grow tomatoes and mint and tiny strawberries that never tasted right but made me feel like I was trying. Friday morning, I went to the nursery, bought too many things, brought them home in the back seat like adopted pets. I got my hands dirty for the first time in months, dug into the earth with the sun on my neck and sweat in my eyes. It felt like a beginning. By noon, the flower beds were full. By evening, I was sore and smiling. I walked inside, sat down, and opened the email from Greg that had come while I was out. It was short. "I heard the decision. If that's how it's going to be, then you leave us no choice." No signature. No goodbye. I deleted it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in bed and stared at the ceiling. The fan spun slow circles. The air was warm. My chest was tight, not from fear, but from something like grief that had nowhere left to go. I got up, wrapped myself in a blanket, and sat by the window. Outside, the garden looked peaceful in the moonlight. It hit me then. They weren't done. The court loss would sting, but it wouldn't be the end. There would be more calls, more emails, more pressure dressed up as concern. I would have to outlast them. But I wasn't afraid of that anymore. I wasn't angry either. I was ready, steady, and finally quiet in a way that didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like preparation. Sunday morning, I woke to banging on the front door. 3 loud knocks, spaced just far enough apart to let me know it wasn't an accident. I pulled on a sweater, slid into my slippers, and opened the door. Greg stood on the porch in a crisp polo, arms stiff at his sides. Danielle was behind him, sunglasses on even though it was barely 8. Her arms were crossed, her mouth tight. I didn't say anything. I stepped back and left the door open. They walked in like they still lived there. Greg didn't sit. He hovered near the dining table. "I didn't want to do this here," he said, "but you won't respond to anything else." Danielle took off her sunglasses and dropped them on the table. "You humiliated us," she said. I stayed near the hallway, watching them like strangers who had gotten lost in the wrong house. Greg pulled a folder from his bag. "We're filing for conservatorship." I blinked. He kept talking. "It's not personal. It's legal. The judge dismissed the trust case, yes. But this is different. You're making decisions that affect the entire family, and we think—" I held up a hand. "No." He paused. "No, Greg." You don't get to walk into my home and use legal words like they're part of a conversation. He opened the folder. Danielle jumped in. Mom, you need help. You're isolating. You're paranoid. You're cutting us out when all we've tried to do is be there for you. Be there for me? I laughed once. Is that what you call it? Greg raised his voice. This isn't about Vegas anymore. I stayed calm. You're right. It's not. It's about now. And now I'm telling you to leave. Danielle stepped forward. You're pushing us away. You think a judge is going to let you die alone in this dusty house and say, that's fine? I think the judge already made it clear I know exactly what I'm doing. Greg dropped the folder on the table. You've forced our hand. No, I said. I gave you a choice. You just didn't like the answer. Danielle pointed at the garden through the kitchen window. You think planting flowers makes you stable? That's what you've been doing while everything falls apart? I looked out at the blooms, bright and strong in the sunlight. It's not falling apart, I said. It's just falling away from you. Greg grabbed the folder, shoved it back into his bag. You'll be hearing from our attorney, he said. I opened the front door wide. Good. Then we won't have to do this again. They walked out without another word. I locked the door behind them. I stood in the hallway for a long time, just breathing. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the weight of holding the line. An hour later, I called Mrs. Cortez. They came to the house, I said. She didn't sound surprised. Did they say the word conservatorship? Yes. I'll draft a response and alert the probate court. I nodded. Thank you. She paused. You okay? I looked around the room. It was still mine. Still quiet. Still clean. I am, I said. They're just louder now. That afternoon I went to the garden, pulled weeds, watered everything twice, let the hose run until the dirt smelled rich again. I stayed outside until the sun dropped behind the trees. I didn't check my phone. I didn't check the mailbox. Monday morning, a letter arrived. Typed. Cold. Their lawyer, filing in 3 counties, requesting an emergency evaluation, citing unstable conduct and erratic changes in estate documents. I placed the letter on the table. I didn't read it twice. Instead, I sat down with a pen and paper. I wrote a timeline, dates, conversations, every message, every withdrawal, every decision. I stapled it together and put it in a fresh folder. Then I wrote a letter, not to them, to myself. It said, You were right to draw the line. Keep holding it. You are not crazy. You are not cruel. You are just done. I folded it and slipped it into the front of the folder. By the end of the week, the probate court would have our names on file. Greg and Danielle had escalated. Now it was my turn. The hearing for the conservatorship was set for Friday at 9 a.m. Mrs. Cortez and I met at her office early that morning. She wore a charcoal suit and no jewelry. She handed me a copy of our final response and said quietly, This isn't about proving you're fine. It's about showing they were wrong to ever question it. I nodded. I didn't feel nervous. I felt hollowed out and focused. The courtroom was colder than the last. White walls, stale air. A judge I hadn't seen before, younger than I expected. Sharp eyes, measured voice. Greg sat across the room, flipping through a notepad. Danielle didn't look up when I entered. Their attorney, a man named Lowell with a square jaw and a polished tone, stood when the judge entered and launched straight in. He read from prepared notes, claiming I had made aggressive financial changes in a short period of time, that I had become unresponsive and erratic, that my actions threatened the cohesion of the family unit. I sat still. Then Mrs. Cortez stood. She handed over my medical assessments, cognitive evaluations, banking history, a log of every communication I had made about the trust. She stated clearly that my choices had been methodical, considered, and fully within my legal rights. She ended by saying, "This is not a case of incapacity. It is a case of entitlement." The judge asked if I'd like to speak. I stood. "Your Honor," I said, "I am not confused. I am not unstable. I am simply no longer available for misuse." Greg shifted in his chair. Danielle stared at her hands. I continued. "I worked my whole life. I raised 2 children on my own. I paid off every debt, saved every dollar. And when I finally tried to use what I'd built for myself, I was met with demands. Not questions, not conversations. Demands." Lowell objected to the tone. The judge overruled. I finished. "This isn't about whether I know what I'm doing. It's about the fact that I finally chose to do something different." The judge thanked me and said he'd issue a ruling by Monday. We were dismissed. Outside the courtroom, Greg followed me down the hallway. "You don't have to be this way," he said. "We can still fix it." I turned to him. "I already did." Danielle stayed behind, leaning against the wall, her face blank. I walked out of the courthouse and into the sunlight. By the time I got home, my shoulders ached. I took off my shoes, turned on the kettle, and sat at the table staring at the garden. The flowers were holding strong, bright colors against the heat. Saturday morning, I woke up to a knock on the door. This time it was quiet, polite. I opened it and found Danielle alone. No sunglasses, no coffee, just her and a folded piece of paper in her hand. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "Then why are you here?" She hesitated, then handed me the paper. "I wrote you something." I took it, but didn't open it. "I'm sorry," she said. I nodded. "I hope you mean that." She stood there for a second, then turned and walked away. I watched her go, closed the door gently. I didn't read the letter that day. Instead, I spent the weekend baking, cleaning the baseboards, reorganizing the closet, things I could control, things that didn't talk back. Monday morning, the court ruling came in the mail. I opened it at the kitchen table. The judge denied the petition, full dismissal, no further hearings, my legal and medical autonomy reaffirmed. I sat back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. It was over. No appeals, no more court dates, no more folders dropped on my table. I brewed coffee, toasted bread, sat down, and finally opened Danielle's letter. It was short, not dramatic, not manipulative, just quiet regret. She wrote, "I don't know why I became the person who thought this was okay, but I did. And I hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know I see it now." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not because it changed anything, but because it didn't try to. That afternoon, I called Mrs. Cortez and thanked her. She said, "You held the line." I said, "They crossed it first." We hung up. Then I turned off my phone, and I went outside. The sun was sharp, but the wind was soft. I stood in the garden, pulled one weed, and left the rest. There was nothing more to fix. 3 weeks after the court ruling, I boarded a train headed north. No one knew. Not Sandra. Not my neighbors. I didn't leave a note or update anyone. I just packed a small bag, locked the house, and left the driveway in the early morning before the sky turned orange. The ride was slow. The train rolled through quiet desert towns and long stretches of nothing. I didn't read or sleep. I just looked out the window. Miles of dust and silence, broken by patches of green and the occasional billboard. I hadn't travelled in years without purpose. No errands, no family visits, no obligation. This time, I had nowhere to be and no one to answer to. When I arrived in Durango, I stepped off the platform into cool mountain air. It smelled like pine and firewood. I walked 3 blocks to the bed and breakfast I had booked under my mother's maiden name. The woman at the front desk handed me a brass key and didn't ask a single question. My room was small, with a view of the river. I unpacked slowly. 2 shirts, 1 book, my journal, a pair of walking shoes, no makeup, no jewelry. I left my phone turned off at the bottom of the bag. That afternoon, I walked through town. No one knew who I was. I bought a coffee and sat outside, watching tourists take pictures. A little boy dropped his ice cream. His mother laughed and wiped his hands with a napkin. I smiled to myself. I didn't miss Greg and Danielle in that moment. I didn't wish they were there. I didn't wonder what they would think of this place or what they would say. That was new. The next morning, I signed up for a watercolor class at a community center. The instructor was in her 70s and wore purple boots. We painted landscapes from photos taped to the windows. Mine was clumsy, with crooked trees and a sky too dark. I didn't care. It was mine. On the 3rd day, I walked the river trail alone. It curved through cottonwoods and dipped under wooden bridges. I stopped halfway through and sat on a bench. The water moved fast, but steady. I watched a family toss stones into the current. Their laughter carried. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't feel proud. I just felt still. That evening, I bought myself dinner at a diner with red booths and pie behind glass. The server called me ma'am and didn't rush me. I ate a turkey sandwich and wrote in my journal. Just 1 sentence. I am a whole person, even without them. The next morning, it snowed. It didn't stick, but it was enough to coat the rooftops and make the sidewalks shimmer. I walked through town, wrapped in a borrowed scarf from the B&B, and watched the town wake up under white light. That was when I decided I would stay another week. I walked back to the inn, added 7 days to my reservation, and asked for extra tea bags. No one questioned it. No one needed a reason. I wasn't asking permission. Later that afternoon, I finally turned on my phone. 23 missed calls, mostly from Greg, a few from numbers I didn't recognize. 1 short text from Danielle. Hope you're safe. We're trying. I read it twice, then powered the phone back off. Trying wasn't the same as changing. That night, I sat by the fireplace in the common room and spoke to no one. The flames moved like dancers with secrets. I sipped tea and let the quiet settle. I didn't think about court. I didn't think about the house. I didn't even think about what came next. I just let myself be. On Sunday, I joined a group tour of a local canyon. We hiked for 3 hours. At one point, we stopped on a ridge, looking down at the cliffs below. The guide pointed to rock formations shaped by wind and time. She said, "They don't resist. They just survive." I wrote that down in my notebook. Back at the inn, I slept for 9 hours straight. By the time I checked out at the end of the week, my face had softened. My shoulders had dropped. My silence had turned into something solid. The woman at the front desk smiled as I turned in my key. "You look rested," she said. "I am," I replied. I stepped out into the cold air and took one last look at the river. Then I boarded the train and headed home. Not because I missed it, because I was ready to return as someone new. 2 weeks after I returned from Durango, Greg showed up again. He didn't call first. He didn't bring legal papers. He just knocked on the door in the middle of a quiet Tuesday afternoon. When I opened it, he looked tired. less polished than usual. No folder in his hand this time, just his eyes, dark and heavy. "I'm not here to argue," he said. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and let him pass. He sat at the kitchen table, the same place where all the lines had been drawn. I didn't sit right away. I poured tea, 1 cup, set it in front of him. Then I sat across from him and waited. He didn't touch the tea. "I've been thinking," he said, "about everything, about how we handled it, about how I handled it." I didn't interrupt. He shifted in his seat. "I didn't come to justify it. I came to tell you I was wrong." That sentence landed harder than I expected. "I thought you'd always take care of things," he continued. "Even when we were grown, even when it wasn't fair. And when you stopped." I panicked. I didn't know how to be your son without taking something from you. I looked at him. He looked like someone who had finally been humbled. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, "but I want to be better than I've been." He slid something across the table. A check. Not a bribe. Not an offer. Just a quiet repayment of what he could cover from the Vegas mess. Not the full amount, but something real. Something earned. I placed my hand over the envelope. "I'm not keeping score anymore," I said. "But I won't stop you from learning." He nodded. "I've started therapy," he said. I didn't know how much I didn't know. We sat in silence for a while. Not angry, not bitter, just sitting. "I'd like to come by once a week," he said. "No pressure. Just to talk, or help around the yard, or listen." "We'll see," I said. "One step at a time." He smiled, and it was small, but it was real. That evening, I received a short message from Danielle. It read, "I heard Greg came by. I'm not ready to visit, but I hope one day you'll let me try." I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to. I stood by the window as the light faded and looked out at my garden. The flowers were blooming again, stronger this time. Roots deeper, color bolder. Healing is never clean. It's not a single moment. It's a slow decision to stop holding the knife to your own skin. It's a choice to look at those who hurt you and say, "I won't carry this for you anymore, but I will carry myself forward." I sat with that thought for a long time. When I went to bed, I slept without dreams. I woke up feeling like the fight had finally left the house. Not because they gave up, because I let go. And letting go wasn't weakness. It was power in its most honest form. It was justice wrapped in quiet. It was forgiveness without forgetting. It was the end of what used to be, and the beginning of what could still be. Maybe this is what peace looks like. A house that no longer echoes with blame. A name no longer used as currency. A life reclaimed in silence, rebuilt in truth. And a door left unlocked, just in case someone finally learns how to knock. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to choose yourself over family expectations? I'd love to hear how you found your own peace. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss the next story. You deserve to feel seen, too.